Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambermont Weber, and once again, we're very privileged to have independent scientist Leuren Moret coming to us from Berkeley, California. Welcome, Leuren.
Thank you, Alfred, and welcome to all our viewers, too. We really appreciate your interest in these topics, and indeed, where else are you going to hear about them than from us? So, thank you very much for being here today.
Certainly, and as I understand it, we have a very uh, uh, insightful and powerful list of topics, of
Yes.
news update topics today. So why don't you please start with that, with the global directed energy weapons, EMF HAARP attacks that we've been finding carried out by the transhumanist agenda.
Well, this is really really amazing. But the HARP attacks are being used globally, and they're manipulating weather to bring about changes, droughts, floods, so forth and so on. There was just a 7.9 earthquake, I believe, yesterday in Indonesia. A lot of people drowned, and all the buoys for the tsunami warning were stolen. I cannot imagine why, but it sounds like sabotage and it sounds organized. And they're using HARP and these frequencies on the battlefield. They're certainly using them in Syria to increase the fighting spirit, for instance, of the terrorists, and they are also being provided with huge amounts of drugs. And the drugs, the combination of the drugs and the electromagnetic frequencies interact with each other synergistically and multiply the effects. So they get a bigger effect than they would with just one or the other. And it was used and is still being used in the Ukrainian war zone as well on the Ukrainian soldiers. Um, I have seen a very definite evidence that this election's candidates, Clinton, Trump, Cruz, Rubio, Jeb Bush, they have all been under very strong mind control. And it's a very crazy, very chaotic election, and very different from ones we've had in the past. I think you would agree about that. Um, and when you start seeing a lot of chaos and strange behavior and mood changes that are out of character, that is the fingerprint of EMF and HARP, and also um, this is also Jesuit technologies that are being rolled out now as the Jesuits take over the United States, all offices almost, and important positions. And we're seeing also Satanism everywhere. All of the public colleges and universities in the United States were transformed to Satanism in beginning in the fall term. And so when you're traveling around Berkeley, you can see that the students are also entrained, and they're also under the very strong and heavy influence of EMF, of algorithms, of the HARP technologies. And I've had discussions with people like you and Larry and other people I know who are older and went through the 60s up to now. And what they're doing with each iteration that they roll out, in addition to what has already been playing, in terms of the EMF, artificial intelligence kind of spell that the human race is being succumbed by, is that all of these new feelings and moods and everything are very familiar, because they've been doing this since the 50s and testing them very carefully and covertly on the public. Now they're just filling the skies with chemtrails, pouring water from the heavens to wash all those metal particles and nanoparticles and who knows what else they put in them, bacteria, viruses, everything. But these tiny nanoparticles, when they stick inside your body, in the cells, to different parts of your biological structure, they act as antennas. They receive and they transmit. And I remember about 5 years ago when I discovered, maybe even 10, that there were press releases going all over the United States from the National Academy of Sciences, the UC Berkeley campus, the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, the National Science Foundation, all these important agencies within our government and the institutions that interact with them were celebrating this discovery in a UC Berkeley lab. And I went to that laboratory website and discovered that they even had a video of these nanoparticles, which they had just discovered they could transmit songs to, and then they could manipulate the nanoparticle into playing the songs back. So that's receiving and broadcasting. And basically, they filled our bodies with nanoparticle antennas through the chemtrails, through food, through drinking water. But I would say the chemtrails are the biggest, and we're going to give some examples today in our interview. But the AI, the HAARP transmissions, all of this is extremely key to the success of the New World Order rollout. And just to emphasize how important, Antarctica is the main, I would say, a military base with countries from different, countries from different regions in the U.S. have made permanent military installations with huge HAARP antennas all over Antarctica. And England has 9. They even have one that was in the Daily Mail a couple years ago advertising it. They were so proud of it. And it was a train of trailers that could be towed by a snowmobile and moved anywhere they wanted to put it in Antarctica. So it was kind of an ice railroad that they could drive around and place anywhere they wanted to. Now, Japan has 3. And one of them, which was when operational in May, right after, or June, right after Fukushima 2011, it was named Pansy, Pansy, and I found it on the Nikon Camera Corporation website, because now I know they're involved in HAARP too. The corporations are all involved in these weapons of mass destruction. And pansy, it says very carefully and delicately, is a beautiful little flower that appears in gardens all over the world. But pansy is a word that originates in French from penser, which means to think or thought. Now, isn't that strange for a military base? Well, it's a mind control base for the Japanese, and they have plenty of them all over Japan as well. Um, and the Russia has 7, and it's still a mystery how many the United States has, how many bases in the Antarctic, but they're there. So this is so insidious, it's so dangerous, and it's so pervasive. And I'm very happy that we're able to present this to the public. As a lawyer, you understand the legality and the illegality of these issues. You understand the impact on humanity and all living things and the environment. And Laurence Battis, who you have interviewed with me, is an engineer. He's been in the Navy. He has that background to bring out more facts, and also he belongs to scientific institutions that even publish and advertise proudly the development and the new research papers announcing these discoveries to enslave humanity. It's insane, Alfred, because people who are sane, who are thinkers, who've been educated, whether it's educated by, just living life or in a formal institution, they're incapable of resisting this or even protecting themselves from it. And then, of course, I have a geoscience background, a radiation background, a nanotechnology background. So I think the combination of all of us is very powerful in presenting the real facts, the real background, the real institutions, the real funding, and most important, the real agendas and who is behind them.
Right, right. Now you have shown that this agenda even has extended to corporations in the U.S. like Walmart, to the refugee crisis in the EU. However, that Putin, on the other hand, is using the EMF directed energy technologies, in other words, HAARP, for a very different effect. Could you go into that? In other words, the HAARP technology is not per se bad. It depends on the application. Is that correct?
Well, yes, and science is always a two-edged sword. There's a beneficial application of science or to science. In other words, I'm a citizen scientist because I want to make the science that the public is paid for through their taxes and so forth, I want to make that transparent to the public. And it's just common sense. Anyone can understand science if it's presented correctly. And if it's presented correctly, it can be very exciting also. And and just remember, it doesn't matter whether you have a formal education or not. Very often they get in the way, and it's a lot of brainwashing and baloney anyway. Um, but the Manhattan Project scientist who made the hydrogen bomb work told my daughter when she was entering university, he said, "You just remember, the university is not the professors or the classroom. The professors need the students. The students don't need the professors, because the university is the library, and you can do that all on your own." So I want to encourage people to get on the internet or go to the library or just start reading or look at scientific institution websites, and you can pick up a lot of stuff. You don't need to understand everything. And anyway, sometimes I have to read a paper 5 or 10 times before I really, really, really understand it. And when it's all new information and new terms and everything, it takes a while, so don't be afraid of it. Just jump in, and pretty soon you will be more confident, and you'll be making exciting discoveries, and then you get self-propelled and nothing can stop you. And our website, LeurenMoret.info, has many, many, many sources of very good information with lots of references so that people can go on and read more about a specific topic in a paper that they're really interested in. So, these technologies are being used by the Americans in very negative ways. For instance, they're hyping up their soldiers with all kinds of drugs. They're controlling them with EMF frequencies and algorithms, and they're loading them down with way too much technology. They call them Pindoses in the Ukraine. The American soldiers are Pindoses. They look like penguins because they waddle. They have so much equipment on them. And it's not beneficial to them. They're not being trained to be on the battlefield. They are being loaded up with gear to make money for the Beltway in Washington, D.C., and they are not being protected by their own technology. In fact, it makes them more vulnerable. So our soldiers are part of the depopulation agenda, and they want them to die. That's why they sent all of the National Guard to these foreign wars to load them up with depleted uranium, and then they'd fly them home 2 weeks before they drop dead. So technology can have very negative applications. Now, other things that they're doing is they are putting headsets on children. They're filling schoolrooms with Wi-Fi. The teachers also wearing headsets. Why are they doing that? That is not enhancing learning. And why are children being used for human experimentation when our Constitution prohibits it? And why are they doing it so covertly? It's because it's illegal, and because they're using our children as guinea pigs. Other things that are happening is these new cell phones, the 4G and the 5G, and each iteration are being loaded with smaller and smaller flat array antennas. They were postage stamp size. They're much smaller now, and there are more of them that will fit into a cell phone. So they're a new array of an antenna array that they can put in a cell phone that makes it much more powerful. And it's really a computer now. Cell phones are a computer, especially with the Android. And so they're programming these cell phones on an individual basis. The government is, or the military is, to completely control and handle individuals. These students that I see around the Berkeley campus are being trained to use weaponized cell phones to attack other students and the civilian population. And they're also being trained to overthrow their own governments if they're foreigners when they go back to their countries. And it's with all these technologies that they learn to use on the university campuses. So universities are not a good place for anybody anymore. They're very, very dangerous, especially in the United States, but this is global. And who's in charge of the Department of Education in the United States? It's the Jesuits. So there we have every trail in all of these technologies, in GMO, in all this misapplied science leads to the Jesuits. Now, what is happening where there's a positive application? I would say Putin, the present president of Russia, is the best example of integrity and a conscious state of working for the benefit of humanity and for his constituents. And he uses technology and transmissions regularly to hold open forums on television, sometimes for 3 hours, where he sits down and he speaks to the Russian people, and it's quite frequent. And they're allowed to ask questions, which he answers. And he does have a very good rapport. He's a very, very good communicator with large numbers of people. And he really is a very good communicator. And we can see in the situation in Syria where he's been laying out, playing card by playing card, the technologies that are very advanced now in Russia that are being used on the battlefield. And these are all new applications, but they're upgrades of weapon systems that already existed. The U.S. can't do that because they have a different way, a methodology of developing weapons, and I'll explain that. But I want to talk about Putin right now. So he has used these technologies, HAARP and EMF and everything, in a defensive mode. In other words, it's to protect his military, to protect the citizens being attacked, to protect the economies of countries being attacked, and even to save Europe and to protect Europe. Now, people don't know the history of Russia very well, and I'm sure very few people are aware that Russia saved Europe 4 times in the 20th century. That's a big shock. But Russia even was saving countries before that, because Russia provided military defenses, in other words, Navy ships, parked on the west and the east coasts of the United States at President Lincoln's request, in order to stop the British from interfering in the Civil War and balkanizing the United States so they could get their central banks into this country by destroying it.
Could you just
Putin, yes.
Could you just briefly document, that earlier time and then the 4 times, not going into detail because I don't want to go off on a tangent, but just for the record, the 4 times that Russia really saved the day?
It was World War I, World War II. He helped with Vietnam. And I don't know what the 4th one was, but I know that he's saving the Middle East now.
Right.
And he did save Europe in World War II, and 20 million Russians died in World War II to save the West. And that's very, very well known.
Right. And as you said, Russia, in essence, saved the American Republic and the American Revolution.
Yes, it did. And what is happening now is we're in a millennium transition. 1,000 years ago, the Silk Road was in decline, which originated in Central Asia and traveled all the way to the Mediterranean. And that's what the Dutch East India Company and the East India Company were involved in, was transporting goods from the Mediterranean region, either near Crimea. They would pick up at that end of the, there were multiple threads of the Silk Road by the time it reached the Eastern Mediterranean. And so the the ship owners would send ships from Venice and then later Genoa and other ports to the Crimea area, the Sea of Azov, to pick up the goods from the camel caravans that brought all these riches from Central Asia. And or they would pick them up in Istanbul or other locations around the Mediterranean. But also the war in Yemen has very, very ancient roots, and the city of Aden was the terminus of the Silk Road that was by water. In other words, it was the Southeast Asian spice trade that ended their journey from Southeast Asia at Aden, and all the spices went on to camel caravans and were distributed around the Middle East and the Mediterranean regions. And some even reached, even the Roman Empire distributed them in Northern Europe and even the British Isles. So these are old trade routes, thousands of years old. Nothing is new. And even Aden, the end of Aden, that was where the slaves also were brought to be transported to Adana on the south coast of Turkey, and that was the terminus of the slave trade route. And they were also transported by camels from Aden through the Saudi Arabian Peninsula to Adana. And those were the slaves that went to the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire was huge. So all these old histories that are there, and we have to know about them or we can never understand what's happening now. So anyway, it's all really, really fascinating, and it's just building on old practices and so forth. But this millennium change that we're in is to restore the Silk Road trade, because it's a much better global basis for an economy, a global economy. And already during the time that sanctions were initiated against Iran, they took that time to upgrade and improve all of their weapons systems. They upgraded and improved their economy, their oil and gas infrastructure, and they also built a railroad with the Chinese from Beijing to Tehran, and that is the first Silk Road part of the railroad that is now open. It just had the first train go from Beijing to Tehran just a week ago. And so the Silk Road is open now, parts of it. And Putin has extended it. It goes from Beijing to Moscow to Berlin, and Putin has extended it to the Middle East and to Egypt. So we're seeing a huge transformation, and to protect it, to protect the western end of it, the Egyptians have given Russia 4 acres of land at the top of the Red Sea, where the Suez Canal empties into the Mediterranean. And Russia has a base there now, a port for its ships, and it's also a free trade zone. At the southern end of the Red Sea, China now has a port in Djibouti, which is north of Ethiopia, but right on the coast, opposite the Bab al-Mandab port, which is it's the choke point for entering the Red Sea to go through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean. So the Red Sea and the Suez Canal are now militarily protected and controlled by Russia at the north end, where the Red Sea enters the Mediterranean, and at the south end, where it empties into the Gulf of Aden or Aden. And it's this is why the war is happening in Yemen. It's fighting over resources. It's fighting over military strategic points, and the West has lost, quite frankly. Russia and China control the Red Sea now. They are not looking for unfair trading. They are not interested in using force to back up an economy or to base an economy on, like the U.S. They're not interested in plundering, in genociding. They want a peaceful world economy. This Silk Road is for the Eurasian continent, but I'm betting that it will be extended to the Americas also. So Putin now also, during these sanctions against Russia, has had time to improve the military gear that the soldiers wear, and they now have communications that are built into their uniforms, fighting uniforms and helmets and everything, and they have reduced their losses in battle by 90% with these improved communications, with the improved weapon systems, with the defense radar systems. They have the most advanced in the world, and they are they're providing these systems to key countries like Azerbaijan, Armenia, other countries that are part of this new Eurasian Silk Road economy, so that they can defend it. They're not interested in unfair trading. The Silk Road economy was based on fair trading and mutual benefit. And Dr. Mahathir, our friend Dr. Mahathir, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, told us that. He said, Oh, I never allowed an American warship to come in any port in Malaysia in 22 years than when I was in office. And I said, why not? And he said, because it took us 200 years. First the British gunships, no, first the Spanish gunships came. It took us 200 years to get rid of them, the Portuguese gunships. Then the British gunships, the East India Company, came. It took us 200 years of fighting to get rid of them. Then the American gunships came, and he said I wouldn't let them into our ports. And the cultures and the tribes that have refused to be infiltrated are the ones that are still viable. They're still winning with their own methods of warfare that worked in the time of Muhammad and Christ and thousands of years before that. And those old methods of fighting, for instance, in Yemen, these tribes don't have any military budget. They don't have any weapons systems fighting Saudi Arabia with they're one of the biggest arms buyers in the world from the United States and England and Germany. And they're using old Kalashnikovs, and they have this curved knife in a scabbard that they wear tucked in their belt right over their belly button, and they're beating the heck out of Blackwater, out of the Saudi Arabian military, out of the United Arab Emirates soldiers and army, and they own half of Blackwater. And finally, Blackwater, a week ago, packed up everything and completely left Yemen. They said, we have lost 200 and 300 soldiers, Blackwater trained soldiers, mercenaries, at a time when the Houthis, those are the opposing forces and tribes in Yemen who are trying to kick the Saudi Arabians out and get rid of the American interference and British and all the other countries there. And they didn't even have money for rockets. So they went to Iran and they asked Iran to show them how to make a rocket. And their rockets are more accurate than the American ones are. And they're targeting 200 or 300 people, 200 or 300 men in a unit of Blackwater at one time, and taking out all of them with one rocket. They have shot down so many planes and destroyed so many tanks and equipment that belonged to Blackwater that they just rolled up and left. And of course, Saudi Arabia has lost the war in Yemen. It's very obvious, but they don't want to admit it yet. And these are Houthis, these tribal people, are wearing crude leather sandals that the people in the biblical period wore at the time the Bible was written, when Christianity began to spread. And they wear the long robes that they've always worn for thousands of years. They still wear the belt, the knife in their belt. The women wear them too. And these tribal people who are part of the Houthis have no contact with outsiders. They will allow once in a while the police to come and escort a journalist, but they can only stay an hour or less, and they say, you have to leave now or we're going to kill you. And the police don't even like to go and take the journalists to them. So, you don't need a whole huge army of all kinds of equipment and everything. It's the spirituality. It's the integrity to your culture. And it's helping each other in organized ways. And a lot of times the old organized ways work much better than the trick bag of beads that we got traded for what has real value. And what we have been given for what was real, what they stole from us, is a false world, false beliefs, false religion, Satanism, pedophilia, and all of this is self-destructive to healthy, normal thinking people, to healthy, normal tribes, to healthy, normal children. Our world is being destroyed. But the spirit of humanity, the strength of our human spirit, reverses that every time. And a monk in Japan, when I was telling him about this transition and all these evil technologies, he said to me, Leuren, don't worry. It's all flim-flam. They can use all their EMF technologies and transmit all they want to, but the power of the human spirit, which is up there, out there in the heavens, it's not down here on earth. They can't touch that. And that will prevail. And I never, ever forgot that. And I don't want anyone who's listening today to ever forget that. No one can hurt you except yourself. So love yourself. Trust yourself. Believe in yourself and have integrity to who you really are and what you really are. And the journey through life is an exciting adventure. There's no such thing as a mistake, I told my daughter all the time. It's all learning experiences. And when you're feeling pain, it's actually a gift from the Creator. It's a time when you're changing and making yourself stronger. And what we're going through now, this huge transition, a millennium transition to a new Silk Road economy, is painful, it's difficult, but it's also loaded with promise, with opportunities, with improvements, with better technologies that benefit mankind. But it required a good leader. And Putin, the creator, I guess, chose Putin to be the leader at this time. Putin is not perfect. No leader is perfect. Don't expect anyone to be perfect. Take the good and leave the bad. You have a choice. But what Putin is doing is developing technologies and applying them on the battlefield to use them as a defense to protect the citizens and the sovereignty of nations, rather than to use them as aggressors and predators and destroyers to plunder and destroy and steal everything. Wealth is never created by destroying things. Wealth is created by peaceful trading. And that is what Putin is intending to create. And I remember when a journalist asked Putin, how much of your time do you spend on military adventures? You know, like Syria, and it was just a couple weeks after he'd started bombing, Russia had started bombing Syria. And how much time do you spend on helping the people? And he sat there and he looked for a minute and he said, I spend 80% of my time improving the infrastructure of Russia for the people. And he has increased the gross national product. I think the economy has quadrupled since he has been in office. That's 15 years. And he had a lot of healing to do after the Soviet Union. And he has done many, many, many wonderful things. The airports of Russia are the best ones in the world now. Russia is now the largest arms manufacturer in the world. They have surpassed the United States. And remember, these arms are developed and meant to be applied for defense. They're not for offense. And what's happened is he's had a really big impact globally because he had all of the Boeing orders canceled for American Boeing aircraft because he said the U.S. government has a back door in all the computers on the Boeing planes, and that makes us liable to plane crashes and disasters that we don't need to have. So he also, I think he's slowly taking them out of service as their own aircraft industry is producing Russian models, and they're more practical for that region, for the climate, for the geography. And more countries now are putting in orders for those same planes, and they're turning away from the American manufacturers. So Boeing now is in a very serious financial crisis, and they are now pink slipping their engineers. They just handed out the first 350 pink slips. So the manufacturing of weapons systems, even in the United States, is being impacted by positive actions by Putin to improve the lives of not only Russians, but everyone on this planet ultimately.
Right. That really is amazing. Now, shifting now to chemtrails applications and effects there in the Bay Area, you have a conference coming up at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, where
Yes.
you've been able to predict and spot some possible chemtrails happening. Could you talk about that?
Yes. The RSA conference is occurring this week, the first week in March, and today's my birthday.
Oh, today
Yes.
is your birthday.
Yes.
March
But this
3rd, 3/3. Well, happy birthday.
yeah, thank you.
We didn't know that.
So,
Otherwise, we would have started out the program with a happy birthday.
oh, we can end it with that, and then people can
Okay.
send us emails too. I got lots of emails last year that I loved on my birthday.
Oh,
That was
good.
better than cakes or gifts or anything. So anyway, the RSA conference is taking place this week, the first week in March 2016, in San Francisco in the Moscone Center, and the this company is a, a computer and internet network security company, private company that started in the 70s. And in 1982, it sort of, these four men who started it really sort of got it going. And they were very famous and had this program named for them actually in 1977. And it's called the RSA Public Key Cryptology Algorithms. And they were so famous for that that they had a very, very, very big reputation, and they were very anti-NSA. In other words, they were dedicated to protecting computers and the internet, the networks, for the public, for the citizens, which is how it should be. But under extreme pressure, by 2005, NSA was compromising them or putting so much pressure on them. I'd like to read a statement in June of 1994 by the RSA president, James Bidzos. And RSA stands for the names, the letter of each of the leaders of this new company. So he said, quote, "For almost 10 years, I've been going toe to toe with these people at Fort Meade." That's the Army. "The success of this company, RSA, is the worst thing that can happen to them. To them, we're the real enemy. We're the real target. We have the system that they're most afraid of. If the USA adopted RSA as a standard, you would have a truly international, interoperable, unbreakable, easy-to-use encryption technology. And all those things together are so synergistically threatening to the NSA's interests that it's driving them into a frenzy." And this happened across the board in Silicon Valley. It was full of bright, young geniuses who were dedicated to this new technology and making it wonderful for the public and the people and protecting them from government interference and spying and intrusion. But by the time James Bidzos, who was the RSA president until 2005, until he resigned, they were able to maintain the integrity of that company. But in 2005, he resigned or retired, and another company bought it, and the NSA now has infiltrated and now even gives money to and does funding for RSA. Now, what is really, really interesting is that this conference is going on now with over 30,000 internet and computer security experts from all over the world. This is an international conference, over 30,000 specialized people with a corporate memory and have the backgrounds in all the developmental stages of the internet are there for the whole week. And what happened? We were going to San Francisco, Laurence and I, during this week, and of course he always attended that conference. And we noticed that the sky was completely clouded over with chemtrails. And you could even see planes laying chemtrails on top of those clouds. And you couldn't even see the sun for the first 3 days. And who knows what's in those chemtrails, but I know it's not good, and I know therefore they're intended for that RSA conference, because now, today and tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, this is a time when people do more networking and getting jobs and grants and things like that. So it's a real social time. People will be going in and out of the buildings, out to lunch and dinner and cocktail parties and everything. And so the HAARP controllers have planned rain for today and tomorrow to rain out all these chemicals and nanoparticles that go right through the skin into your body, all those miniature antennas on all of the attendees to this conference. There are also pathogens and who knows what else. But we can see the volatility of the solvent that's used when the planes spray these chemtrails. And some of them, you can only see the chemtrail for 7 seconds. By then, it's completely vaporized, and it's gone, mixing in the atmosphere and in the rest of the chemtrails they've laid down. And these chemtrails go across the whole United States, but this heavy rain out today and tomorrow is intended for the attendees to that conference. And so I just like to emphasize to people how determined, how dangerous, and how insane this New World Order agenda and the people behind it are. It's very, very crazy. And when things start getting very, very crazy, that's the Jesuits and their helpers. So what we're trying to do is inform people and to caution them. And I want to use this story also to encourage people always, when you go outside, to wear a hat, to cover all of your skin, wear gloves, wear long coats, wear shoes or boots or pants that cover your legs and your ankles and your feet, and stay out of the rain. Do not go out when there's fog, mist, rain, snow, because that is that's all the death watch. It really is. And it's I mean, I can't even go outside anymore. I haven't been outside on a bicycle for like 2 years. I can't ride in the chemtrails. I get staph infections, pustules all along my hairline if I go outside and I don't wear a hat. The cat can't go outside now. The streets are all shiny in Berkeley when they're chemtrailing. And then when you go to the BART station and you look on the mats that the people walk across to enter the train, it's to show people where to enter the train, and it shows the train driver where to stop. But these have bumps on them, and you can see the chemtrail material crystallizing on these bumps, and there's even a wind shadow, so that the wind is blowing in a certain direction over the mat, and the crystallization happens on the backside of the bump where the wind is less. This isn't right. This isn't legal. This isn't good for anybody except a few small crazy people at the top. And there are more of us. We can't act on our own behalf unless we know what's really happening. And although people listen to us, I know they like our interviews, sometimes it's very frightening. Believe me, it's very frightening for me to do the research and discover what they're really doing. I want to stop them. I'm a scientist. I know what they're doing. And I have this horrible feeling of helplessness overcome me because I can't stop it. I've been all over the world in 50 countries telling everyone what is happening, warning against a Fukushima disaster. I predicted Fukushima in a 2003 Japan Times article. I never imagined it would happen. I just knew Japan was the wrong place for nuclear power plants. And so people need to protect themselves. Don't listen to Alex Jones and believe all of it. Don't look at the Western media and believe they're telling you anything that's true. Go and use the internet for your advantage and to your advantage. If you want to know what's happening in the Middle East, go to the Gulf region newspapers. There's farsnews.com in Iran. Iran is involved in the Syria war, so they're reporting every day on it, and on Yemen also. Or go to Al-Ahram, which is an Egyptian publication. Or go to, what's the Lebanese one?
Al-Manar.
Al-Manar. We will list these in the comments section of this interview so that people, they don't know how to spell it. So we'll list the sites and the country. And you start reading what the Hezbollah in Lebanon is saying. They're great reporters, and they have a network, so they get the real information from the other fighters in other wars around the Middle East. So this has opened up a whole new news source for us, and that's why we're able to inform people and to compare what Putin is doing in Syria to what the U.S. is doing in the Pentagon. It's just really a big adventure. Just make it a big adventure. There's nothing to be afraid of. What's happening is happening. We have no control over other people. We only have control over ourselves. But remember, no one can hurt us. Only we can. No one can destroy us. We destroy ourselves. And so we have to keep ourselves healthy, nutritionally, physically, and spiritually. And you do that by having friends who are healthy, friends who are, they have integrity, they have values. And if you can't find any, start going to minorities and people who belong to tribes, because they have a different reality and it's worked for thousands and thousands of years. And there's a reason why it's worked for thousands of years. It benefits the whole tribe and keeps the whole tribe healthy. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. And I want to ask a follow-up here, because I know that I shared an article with you a short while ago, and that is we did an interview with Magnus Olsson, who's been working from Sweden, who's been working at the forefront of this, and he was severely attacked with directed energy weapons in Spain over the weekend, almost died, fortunately reached the ICU, was attended by 12 physicians, survived, the good news is that he launched an organization called the World Coalition Against Covert Harassment. One of their programs that they're launching is a model statute. And that statute does exactly, among the many other things it does exactly what you asked for, and that is to ban all of the negative uses of these weapons like HAARP, exactly what they're doing at the Moscone Center. And this goes because this is an adaptation of what you and I worked on, which was HR 2977. You remember that one, right?
I sure do. That was my beginning.
Yeah. So what we've done, Leuren, and let me just talk for about a couple of seconds here.
Oh,
and
go
make
ahead.
the full description because I want to get your comments on it. What we did is that we took the Space Preservation Act and Treaty, which former U.S. Congressman Dennis Kucinich introduced in October of 2001. Right after the 9/11 attacks, he couldn't even get into his offices at the U.S. House office buildings because of the CIA anthrax. You know, it was all false flags. I mean, it's the U.S. secret government attacking the U.S. constitutional government. And it's all, you know, phony baloney. But what we were able to do was to put in that the beginnings of what has now come into master legislation at the global level that can be adapted and enforced by any international body, by a regional body like the European Union or any other body, by nations, by Russia, by Azerbaijan, by Spain, anybody, at the municipal level. And in fact, there's a municipality in California that just adopted HR 2977 just a couple of months ago.
Oh, wow.
Which kind of blew my mind that HR 2977 was a group collaboration. I wrote it on my $75 laptop up here in Vancouver, Canada, the draft. I sent it down to Kucinich's office with Dr. Cal Rosin. We fine-tuned it. He walked it down to the legislative hopper, and that was it. But it's now eventuated into the model statute that WorldCatch is now publishing. You can go to newsinsideout.com. There's an article there. The link to the statute is in there, and it's now at the world level. And they tried to assassinate Magnus Olsson over the weekend of February 27, 28, 2016. He survived. We even have photographs of him in the ICU at the hospital and testimony from those who were there. The Gary Owen came in, and he's a solid citizen, a person from the UK who lives in Spain and now has joined this as a vice president and really helped save Magnus's life. And I've interviewed Magnus. I've known him for a long time, and I spoke to Gary, and it looks like we're going forward. And they're also going to establish a tribunal, and have asked me to be one of the 3 judges. And his intent, Gary knows quite a bit and was quite supportive of, at the Kuala Lumpur Tribunal, of our having nailed both Tony Blair and George Bush in his cabinet for war crimes. And what Gary, because he was really pursued by the members of Parliament because of his activism in the UK and how he had to go to Spain, and and he believes that the Masons and the Freemasons are a lot behind this. So he now wants to organize the tribunal and not only go after the nations, but pierce the corporate veil and go into these secret societies like the Freemasons that are really organizing this from behind. And so I think that provoked that attack. Fortunately, Magnus Olsson survived, and now we're moving forward. But I would urge you, and I know that you have it, we didn't have enough time, but to take a look at that statute, because you've been on board since HR 2977, which goes back to October, it's the days right after 9/11, October 2001, and maybe you can come on board and jointly help the World Coalition against covert harassment and begin, to speak out more in support of this model statute, which of course we were the technical advisor that drafted it and got it rolling. So I just wanted to get your comments on that.
Well, I would be very pleased to do that, and I would like to take it to Putin. I would like to take that and ask President Putin to support it.
Very good.
And you see, Mahathir was a wonderful, wonderful leader for Malaysia. He's the first non-royal. Tun Muhammad Mahathir, a medical doctor, and he has a wonderful wife who is Tun Siti, who is also a medical doctor. And together they created a Malaysia for Malaysians. And he improved the economy and the standard of living and raised all of the salaries and everything tremendously during his time in office. And he invited us to 3 tribunals in Malaysia. We participated in them. You were a judge, and I was an expert witness on nuclear, radiological, and exotic weapon systems. And it was a really, really exciting experience. And what I observed during those processes, it started when the Palestinian people, right after Mahathir left office, the Palestinians came to him and said, "Would you please help us? We've gone to every Muslim leader in the world and other leaders too, and no one will help us." And Mahathir said very graciously and calmly, "Of course I will." And he set up a war crimes tribunal. He didn't start with Palestine. He did it very strategically. He started with a war crimes tribunal for Iraq. And that was contentious enough. And I kept going to him and saying, "Oh, that reporter is, I know him. He's from America. He's CIA." Mahathir turned to me and said, "Oh, all reporters are CIA, or they're all spies. We know that." Actually, ambassadors are too. And he said, "Don't worry about it. We're putting this tribunal on and inviting everyone. We want everyone to come. And we trust that the truth will prevail." And as you know very well, the Iraq tribunal turned out much better than we thought it would. And by the time that he did the Palestine tribunal, which you were involved in, that was the most difficult one because of UN, United Nations interference. And I saw for instance, we'd be gathered, a group of us in a cafe or in a lounge or something in this 5-star hotel where they put us. And for instance, I noticed that Christian Scherer, who works at the Hiroshima Peace Institute in Japan, but he's from Switzerland, he was always hanging around with Michelle Shasadovsky, with Dr. Hans von Spanek, with Dennis Holliday. Von Spanek and Holliday were under secretaries under Kofi Annan. They were in charge of Iraq after Hussein was removed. And they fed the Iraqi people, but they also poisoned them with depleted uranium. And I didn't think they were so perfect. But one day we were sitting in the lounge, and you were with me, and the former UN ambassador from Iraq was talking to the crowd, and he was describing something that had happened in the UN over the Iraq issue that was very dramatic and had very big consequences for Iraq, and not in a good way either. And so I looked to my right, and there was Christian Scherer, and I always wondered why he was at these meetings and always hanging around with the UN big guys. And he had a newspaper on the table, and I noticed that he had a tape recorder hidden under the newspaper. So he was recording everybody's conversations at that informal get-together. Remember that? And so one day, a couple days later, I said to him, "What?" Oh, he said, "Oh, I'm going to Cambodia after this." And I said, "What are you going there for?" He said, "To spy on the tribunal." To spy on the tribunal. And I said, "Well, who are you spying for?" And he started stumbling and mumbling, and he went, for myself. Well, he gave himself away, and he gave his game away. He's a spy for the United Nations. And he was spying on the Khmer Rouge tribunal in Cambodia and reporting back to the UN. Well, you know the experience we had with the UN, especially me. It was horrible. And they sabotaged, they lied, they undercut, they went behind doors and whispered, and they did everything to get me squeezed out of it because they didn't want the depleted uranium issue brought up in any of these tribunals, especially in the Iraq and the Palestine tribunal, because they're poisoning everybody.
Yeah. So, well, I can assure you that that if I have anything to say about it as judge on this tribunal, I mean, I am an impartial judge, but I know that the use of depleted uranium is per se a war crime and a crime against humanity and results in genocide. So I'm just saying it, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. And just to show you the shenanigans that the CIA does when it infiltrates an organization, I was a judge on the Kuala Lumpur Tribunal, and I've written a long 26-page article explaining this. But when we got to try Israel, the administrator of the court, who was married to the niece of the king of Malaysia, or the former king of Malaysia,
Sultan,
the Sultan there, came to me and sent me urgent phone calls, and said, "Oh, Cynthia McKinney can't find this is former Representative Cynthia McKinney of Georgia. She can't find a counsel to represent Israel, because in these courts, they are meant to be, authentic. So there's counsel that represent the commission that's prosecuting Israel for war crimes against the state of Palestine, war crimes and genocide and crimes against humanity since 1948 to the present. And then presumably you have counsel is provided for the state of Israel, because what happens is that the state of Israel won't appear, just like Tony Blair did not appear and George W. Bush did not appear. They did not wish to make themselves available to the jurisdiction of the tribunal. Essentially, they fled. So they were served, duly served, with the complaints, etc. So he called me here and says, "Oh, there's no thing, you've got to act, and you've got to get." So I took this seriously, and I contacted my colleagues, my peers, who are professors at the Yale and Harvard Law School, and who are experts in this area, and none of them would appear as counsel. Isn't that interesting? And
Yep.
they were all Jewish. And
Yep.
none of them wanted to appear to represent Israel. And so then I contacted through one of my friends, because I set up exopolitics clubs for about 20 plus countries in the world, including Exopolitics Israel. And a very good friend of mine, who is an Israeli artist, is my co-administrator. And I contacted her and I said, "Look, can you find me somebody in Israel?" And she went to the university there and found the most outstanding professor of international law in Israel that had looked up his name and walked into his office. And even he turned her down. He did not want to represent Israel. Isn't that amazing?
They're all in the game, and they know what the price is if they do
that
something
was
wrong.
No, but wait. So that was my good faith,
Effort, yeah.
attempt. So then we get to the trial, and I'm sitting next to the prosecutor, who is that fellow who was the name of that American?
Dershowitz?
No, that American prosecutor.
Oh, Boyle.
Boyle, right. I'm sitting next to Boyle at lunch, and I tell him, they called me, and we tried to get, very outstanding. I called Yale, I called Harvard. We tried to get professors in Israel. We tried to get professors. I went to the Inns of Court in London to see if we could get counsel for Israel, and everybody turned it. Nobody wanted to defend Israel. It's really amazing.
Right.
So I told Boyle, and this was during lunch, prior to the trial was starting the next day, and then the next day, when trial started, Boyle got up and said, and Matthias, who was the former prosecutor, who was on the team of prosecutors and the commission, got up and said that it's his understanding that one of the judges had contacted this prominent attorneys at Yale, at Harvard, in Israel, and to try and get counsel. And therefore, I was a Zionist, and I had to be disqualified. That was Matthias. So that Boyle had taken my luncheon conversation, had called up Matthias on the cell phone, and then had tried to get me disqualified as a Zionist, and the rest of the judges voted me off.
Well, they're Zionists.
No, I mean, that's how utterly
corrupt.
No, wait. That's how the Zionists set it up to have me called a Zionist. You get it? Now,
yeah, they're the Zionists. Yeah.
No. It was CIA, but it was so transparent and so filthy and so disgusting. I mean, I just wanted to puke, because I was acting as a scholar and a gentleman, and I thought that I was dealing with you know, here's the guy, he's married to the niece of the king, and they come to me, they give me urgent phone calls in my home in Vancouver, and they say, you've got to get outstanding counsel for Israel. I take them seriously because, you know, in the legal world, I've operated at the top. So I go to my classmates are professors of law at Yale. I talk to them personally. They refer me to professors of law at Harvard. I talk to them personally. All of them turn me down. I get in touch through Exopolitics Israel. I find out who the most outstanding international law professor is in Israel. I ask my artist friend and colleague in Israel to go to his office. She does. He turns her down. And then no good deed goes unpunished. I tell Professor Boyle at lunch, oh, by the way, we really tried to, you know, get counsel so that you would have some kind of opposition instead of the law students that normally come here, you know, for the token opposition, or, you know, and what he does is he picks up the cell phone, calls Matthias, who's a 32nd degree Mason, who was initiated.
33rd.
He's a 33rd degree Mason, and he was initiated and stayed at the home of the Grand Master Masons of the United Kingdom.
That's right.
He was educated in the United Kingdom. And that's how they played it dirty with me. You know, you got the king involved,
but even they're crude when they do that. They're really not very good.
To all the best law schools in Israel, the best law schools, Harvard, Yale, in the United States, and set me up like some kind of Dumbo, right? That's what they do to people. They just set them up like Dumbos. Alfred Weber, the Dumbo. And that's what I did. You know, well, I wrote a 27-page thing, you know, don't Zionists mean me, and I just exposed the whole thing. But that's, you know, Alfred, but that's not going to happen in our tribunal. This tribunal is going to be serious. Okay.
Okay. So
and we're going to call you as an expert witness.
Yes.
I'll tell you that.
Yes. Going back to Boyle. Well, Matthias Chang showed us his photos of him in his 33rd degree Mason ermine-trimmed cape with a crown on his head. So we saw the photo, both of us did. And so Matthias he's a British agent, MI6, so what else would he do? And Francis Boyle is a Jesuit. He's Jesuit trained. He's from the University of Illinois or the University of Chicago, so he's under the Rockefeller influence as well. These are all agents who infiltrated that. And all these horrible things that happened, Boyle then went to the Palestinians when the Palestinian tribunal was starting, and he convinced all of the Palestinian witnesses to leave because Mahathir and everyone else was going to screw them in that trial. So they got on planes and left before they even testified at the tribunal. And what did Mahathir do? He is used to swimming with cockroaches. He knows how to handle them. And so what he said, we'll just do it over again. So they spent $5 million more on a second Palestinian trial, and it's still having reverberations and impact all over the world. That effort was very successful. It just took some, persistence to get it through. But the UN was trying to control those tribunals, and even Castro sent his son to spy on us. I saw Castro's son at that conference. And so these people are always around. They're always surrounding us. There's always darkness where there's light. And what you do is what Mahathir did. It was to stay focused. Wait, Alfred.
It was I
What?
just want to say what I had hoped to do that was that by having a strong Palestinian, Malaysian, Islamic bench prosecutor, okay, and then having a defense team with integrity, you know, say a professor from the university in Jerusalem in international law, or the guy in international law from Yale. You know, hopefully they weren't Zionists, but everybody says, oh yeah, they're all Zionists. But at least bring these parties together, right? To see if
The politics under the table, we weren't allowed to see that.
I see.
But there was a lot of very, very heavy stuff going on, and Michel Chossudovsky's father started the UN. He was one of the key movers who got the UN started, and that's why he has so many doors open to him all over the world. But he's a very dirty player too.
I think among the guys that put the knife in my back was Chossudovsky. I mean, they had the guy with the king involved. They had Matthias involved. Why would they set me up to go out and get the Israel prosecutor, and then have the 33rd degree Mason say, you know, oh, he's a Zionist. I mean, what a setup! What a stupid.
Well, they
thing, right?
they shot you with the bullets they knew would kill you, and that's what killed you. They knew exactly what buttons to push. But they took out Nilofer. Alfred, stop.
What?
They took out Nilofer Bhagwat. Also, you were not the only judge who got squeezed out.
I see.
Got pushed out.
They had targeted me, basically.
They don't want honest people. They only wanted insiders.
I see.
They didn't want to take any chances, and the Palestinian Tribunal had such a huge impact anyway that, can you imagine if it had been, you know, properly done with you can still have a tribunal if the other side fails to appear.
Yeah,
that's their option. They can go. Wait a minute. They can go and defend themselves, or they can choose not to. Yeah. And what they do is they don't go, and then they plan to destroy the outcome of the tribunal. But it had the opposite effect. It backfired on them.
Yeah.
Now let's go back to these tribunals and this new one that you're organizing in Europe on the gang stalking and everything.
Yeah, I'm not organizing it. I've been asked to be a judge. And it's being organized, Alfred.
Yeah. Alfred, we're getting AI'd right now.
Okay.
So just have that in mind. But let's go back to the doing this tribunal and who might be included. Now, what has happened with Putin? I'm watching all the things that he's doing, and whether he follows through on his promises, whether he makes mistakes, whether he lies about anything, and I haven't seen anything like that. Putin went to the UN on September 29th. He told them what he was going to do, and he confronted the U.S. with their egregious war crimes of destroying country after country systematically in the Middle East and North Africa and other places. And by the way, the refugee crisis in Europe, which is destroying the European Union and Europe, is also American. That came out of the RAND Corporation. Curtis LeMay started the RAND Corporation. He was a warmonger, and he was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was absolutely crazy. And that scheme to create all these countries with displaced populations, well, it turns out that they were sent, all these Central Asian and North African populations that were victims of war, American wars, were sent to Turkey secretly, where they were housed in refugee camps for a year and a half by President Erdogan, and the United Nations was feeding them secretly for about a year and a half, and then it was Angela Merkel, the what's she called, the Chancellor of Germany, who was blackmailed by the U.S. and mind controlled also, to just open the floodgates without speaking to any of the other EU members and saying, we'd like to help these refugees out. Could we do it communally and agree on a proper plan, and then return them to their countries when they're able to live there? They're rebuilt. And she was mind controlled. She just opened the floodgates, and thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees are still flooding into Europe. They're going to destroy Europe. And that was very, very unfortunate, but that's an American plan also. And Curtis LeMay and a lot of the people around him were all Jesuits. So the RAND Corporation is a Jesuit-based institution. And everywhere we go, we're seeing the footprint underneath everything else of the Jesuits. They've been hidden very, very carefully and strategically in all the things in America bad that are happening now. And they've done this for centuries. That's what they're really all about. Now, what has Putin done? Well, what Putin has done is he's told the UN what he was going to do. The U.S. was completely unprepared for it, and European country governments also. But he went into Syria the very next day and started bombing the terrorists. He has worked very closely with the United Nations Security Council, which China and Russia are members of. The U.S. is too. They also have rotational members. And he is trained in international law. He's an international law lawyer. And he has forced the UN Security Council to abide by the UN Charter and to abide by international laws. And he's been very, very successful with it because he's able to project power and he's able to project leadership. And I said before, he's a very, very good communicator. Now, what he is doing is cleaning out NGOs, not just from Russia, but he's going to other Central Asian leaders and telling them to clean out the NGOs because they're agents of the United Nations. They are there as agents of the New World Order, and they receive their funding from the New World Order, so that's who they're really working for. And he has investigated each NGO separately to determine where their funding is coming from and who's on it and what their bias is and so forth. He didn't kick all of them out. He only rejected or forced them to register as foreign agencies or to leave the country completely. That was their choice. And these NGOs are some of the biggest perpetrators and supporters and agents and assets for the color revolutions of George Soros. And I think that if people want to be part of the change in a positive way, it's to go to leaders like Mahathir and to Putin, who have demonstrated integrity and that they are working for the people. And I haven't seen anything in this Syrian situation where Putin was doing anything incorrect. And he has very, very good advisors. Lavrov is his foreign minister or secretary of state. He's really good. These are all very professional people. They have given Putin very good advice. He has an excellent Minister of Defense, General Shoigu, who is an indigenous person from the Siberian region who grew up in a yurt. He grew up as a nomad in Siberia in a tent that was moved every time the family moved. And they followed the animals and they followed the seasons. And now he's in charge of protecting his own home traditional tribal region and the Arctic. So he has a personal, indigenous, vested interest in doing the right thing, not just for Russia, but for his region and his roots also. So these are the people we want to find and go to support us, not the wrong people who are funded by oligarchs, funded by corporations, funded by corrupt governments, and you can't go anywhere with criminals and expect them to not act like criminals because that's what they are.
Yeah, and those people who set up citizens' tribunals should take the responsibility to protect the judges from undue influence.
Well, that was all rotten from the top, and it was from Matthias Chang. And the sad thing is that Mahathir trusted him, and Mahathir has trusted a lot of people who betrayed him in his life.
Yeah.
But the difference is that Mahathir expects those people to be around. But Mahathir, who started out selling bananas in a village, he knows people, he knows life, he knows reality. And so he's not dissuaded or slowed down or anything when there is betrayal. He keeps going, and he reaches for the truth, and he's honest. And that's why he's prevailed.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I'm keeping at this segment, obviously, is because our program is distributed to the network of everyone who has participated in all our activities in Malaysia, so that this interview will at least be accessible to everyone in the tribunal, in all the war conferences, all of the witnesses, all of our supporters and detractors, and enemies and friends in Malaysia, all the way up to Dr. Mahathir and his wife. And I sincerely hope that everyone will listen to this dispassionately in the same way that Leuren and I provided our services while we were there. And I hope that it is of some benefit to you, the experiences that we had being sabotaged by agents of influence of, various world powers.
It's just part of the fun.
Sorry?
It's just part of the fun, Alfred.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, it's just a game, and
I see, a sport.
And so
but I mean, they should say, entering war zone. Don't trust anybody. You're about to be sabotaged. It's not fun.
Well, I'll tell you something. When I started out, I didn't know anything about doing anything. I just wanted to address the radiation issue because I realized, being a scientist, how dangerous it is. And so I had lots of expectations of people and thought I could make changes. I was disappointed so much over and over again. Finally, I said, why do I need to have expectations? I'm just going to put this information out there and let go of it like fairy dust around the world and let people do what they want to with it.
It looks like things are evolving toward that direction. You just let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, but you see, Mahathir and you and I and Laurence and other people are agents of truth.
Right.
And as long as we keep putting the truth out, people will find it. They're not ready for it if they're rejecting it. You don't want to interfere with their own personal process. When they're ready, they know where to find it.
Okay.
And they know who to trust.
Those are very profound words. Thank you for this life lesson. I'm very grateful because you were the one that nominated me to Mahathir for a judgeship.
Yes,
And you
that's
provided
right.
me and the world with useful lessons for everyone. Now,
But let me tell you a little story
yeah,
about you and how you helped me. And
okay.
when I met you and I heard about um, your HR 2977, I thought that was fantastic. I didn't know anything about HAARP, and I didn't find out until later that HAARP had been developed secretly during the Cold War at the Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab, where I was a scientist, and in the Soviet Union. And so when I saw your bill for Congress, I said, I have to help him. I have to promote this locally, and the only place I could do that is in Berkeley, where I live. So I contacted you, and you helped me write a resolution banning
Right.
weapons in space over the airspace over Berkeley. And so the night I was in the city council meeting, I thought maybe no one will vote for it. That'll be really horrible. And I was afraid anyway of being in front of the city council. I'd never participated in city government activities. And much to my surprise, the vote came, or the resolution came before the city council. They looked at it. They had no idea what it was about or what the implications were, but it looked liberal, so they all voted for it. It was unanimous. And I almost fell over, cold, passed out on the floor. I couldn't believe it. I batted 100 the first time I hit a ball. And and that resolution actually was picked up by citizens all over Canada, and they
Yeah.
used it to gather signatures to take into the Canadian Parliament and to force the Parliament to reverse the secret agreement that Prime Minister Martin had with George Bush. And
Yeah.
that was to put missile defense in Canada.
Yeah.
And they had stacks and stacks and stacks of signatures from thousands of them from all over Canada. And I said, oh my God, it passed. Parliament reversed his secret agreement. And I said, oh my God, I was reading about it on a bus going over the border into Canada to visit you. And I said, oh my God, it passed. And I said, Martin will be out of office within 6 months. And he was gone between Christmas and December, about 4 months later.
Exactly. And we took the Berkeley resolution that you got passed, and we introduced it in cities here. The first one to pass it was Sparwood, BC. And I remember because it came in on my fax
Right.
machine. And then all the cities in BC, including Vancouver, adopted it. And then it went clear across the country.
Into Japan.
And this was George Bush behind, and Lockheed
Yes.
Martin were going to install U.S. missile defense in Canada. And then
And
we stopped them, and it was all with your Berkeley resolution. Isn't
that's
that
right. And
wild?
now we can use the Berkeley resolution with the Sea Catch movement, and we can protect our own airspaces
Yeah,
over our own cities. And so
exactly.
act locally but think globally.
Exactly. That is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful vision.
Yes. And then we will, when we're at a point where it's all put together and we have supporters, we can take it to Putin, and I'll do that.
Great. Sounds really good.
So I hope people will join us and find ways, creative ways to do it their own way. It's really fun. It really is fun. And it's very empowering, and it's what we should be doing to protect ourselves, to protect our nation's sovereignty, to protect the biosphere and our planet. This is our planet. It's not theirs. They think it's all theirs.
Well, look, over the next couple of weeks or month, go to the link where the model statute is.
Yeah.
You know, take a look at it and evaluate it, and we'll do a show on it.
Oh, good. Okay. Now let's go on to the next topic.
Yeah, this is Dana.
Right, Dana. Did we do the Pope and the Patriarch?
No, it's Dana, and then the final is
Okay.
the Pope and the Patriarch.
Okay, great. So now we're going to discuss Dana DURNFORD, who is a wonderful, wonderful citizen activist in Canada, and he's about 8 hours up the coast, the west coast of Canada from Vancouver. He was a commercial diver, and he spent a lot of his time in the ocean collecting, commercially diving for sea urchins and other edible foods from the ocean. So he was familiar with the health of the tide pools, the health of the ocean along the coast of British Columbia. And he would be an expert witness based on his own professional experience. And what he did is he had an injury from diving too much and too deep, and had the bends and got nitrogen in his spine, which paralyzed him. So he's in a wheelchair now. Can you imagine a person being still motivated with such a disability? He's very, very courageous, and everybody should be supporting him. We should not allow this to happen to him, what I'm going to describe now. He started criticizing two scientists. One is Ken Bessler, who works at Woods Hole in, I believe it's in New York or Long Island. It's a professional U.S. governmental research facility, mostly for the oceans, related to the oceans. And he was collaborating and cooperating with a British Columbia scientist. I've forgotten his name. And so they were hired or appointed to do research as a cover-up on Fukushima. And Bessler, I remember reading about him right after Fukushima happened, within a few months. He was took a Woods Hole ship and went over and started sampling seawater in the lagoon and in the ocean offshore from the Fukushima disaster. And so he was doing measurements and measuring the radionuclides. And I looked at his data and reports, and then I compared it to professional reports and data from other people. And his data, it was impossible to come up with the numbers that he came up with. They were way, way, way too low, and they didn't agree with other international agencies and professional organizations that had also been sampling and doing other kinds of research, monitoring the radiation levels at Fukushima. And I was in a network in contact with scientists all over the world who were giving me the raw numbers every day on what their government monitoring office or facility was measuring. And so we had the real data. We knew what was really going on. A lot of us were very good radiation experts or specialists, and we all concurred that it was a very serious issue, and that we were getting the real numbers, and people were graphing them and putting them on the internet. Very, very important. And people can read about Fukushima, my scientific papers for the public, made transparent with 100 references on each one so they can go and read more if they want to. But they're on the LeurenMoret.info website, and they're called Fukushima, Ocean Environment, and there's a part 1 and a part 2. If you can't find it, leave a message in the comments section, and I'll put the I'll drop the link in into the comment section on the YouTube video of our interview. So I knew Bessler was a fraud, and I knew he was doing a professional cover-up to protect the U.S. government, the Queen of England, TEPCO, and the Japanese agencies and so forth who were involved with it. It was a false flag. And it was artificially triggered with HAARP, and it had been planned since the 1950s. It took that long to do all the research, to study the currents and everything in the North Pacific, to survey the marine mammals, the fish populations, everything. All that was done in order to set up the Fukushima disaster. And so I knew that he was a fraud, but I didn't encounter him again until I became aware of Dana Durnford and his interviews and his information that he's been giving the public, presenting to them from his research. Someone donated a big ship to him, a big boat, and he's done a wonderful job that's an amazing for someone with the handicap that he has. And suddenly, this is when I really got involved, I heard in the fall of 2015 that he had been charged with terrorism against Bussler and this other Canadian scientist. And terrorism is a very, very, very serious charge. And so then I followed the court appearances. He went in 2 times, and the judge said, well, I can't do anything. There's no police report. There's no complaint against you, but there's a lawsuit here. But I can't act on it until there's a complaint from the police. There are no charges against you. And so Dana turned around, and there was a man standing there, and he said, I'd like to talk to you. Can I help you? You seem like you're kind of lost or something. And Dana said, well, my name isn't on the list of cases today. I don't understand why. And he said, oh, I'll help you. I'll find out. Well, they talked some more, and then the guy said, well, actually, I'm a policeman. I'm the one who's supposed to file the charges. But I wonder if you would come down to the police department right now from the courtroom, and I'll do a taped interview of you. And Dana looked at him, and Dana had a witness with him, and he said, get lost. I'm not going to the police department and giving you information that you can use against me. So then he was ordered to take down all of his interviews, take everything off the internet. He couldn't talk to anyone. He couldn't tell anyone anything about the lawsuit. And the next thing that happened was he went back to court a couple more times, and the judge said, where's your lawyer? And Dana said, I've gone to all these lawyers and no one would represent me. And the judge said that I'm going to assign a public defender. Now, the judge said, you will not be allowed to have any expert witnesses. You cannot introduce any of the evidence we have against you or defend you against it. You cannot defend yourself. You can't use the evidence that we're using against you. You can't challenge it and defend yourself, and you can't have any expert witnesses. And so then there it was. It was a political prosecution, a judicial prosecution of Dana. Now, it turns out that when he was in the courtroom that first day and talked to the policeman, the prosecutor came up and said, "Where's your lawyer?" And he said, "I don't have one." And the prosecutor said, "Oh, okay, then you can have this envelope." And it was all of the documents that he had to prosecute Dana with. And because of disclosure, he had to give it to Dana. Well, Dana took it home with his friend, and they read it about 5 times. And it turns out that this was a false flag. The U.S. FBI was involved. That had all been premeditated, and he had been subjected to entrapment by the FBI, by the U.S. government, and by the law enforcement agencies in Canada. So it was all rotten from the beginning.
How? Exactly what acts?
Well,
was he entrapped to do?
The professor at the University of in Vancouver and the Professor Bustler at Woods Hole had blogs, and they'd been discussing a year and a half before Dana was even notified that he was going to be arrested. They were discussing how to set him up and how to entrap him and how to do this and do that to be able to prosecute him on false charges. It was all in the blogs in their own handwriting.
I see.
In the texts. And then it turns out the FBI, they said the FBI's involved. They want to set him up.
So this is
and they're working, the U.S. government and the FBI are working with the Canadian government and CSIS and the RCMP.
Right. It's a malicious prosecution.
It's malicious prosecution and entrapment, because then it turns out there are people around him who have given him money who were agents for the FBI or for the Canadian officials, COINTELPRO. One of them gave him $35,000 to buy the boat with so that he could collect all this data and then challenge these fraudulent scientists, government scientists. And then after he went to court and the gag order was put on him, another one gave him expensive software to create a studio environment where he appears to be in a studio giving his doing his interviews and giving his talks, which violated the court order. So that's entrapment. Both of those people, all those people are involved in entrapping him. And this is after the charges were filed.
Well, I would say even more. I think that that's a fusion of COINTELPRO and Black Ops.
Yes, it is. It is. And Britain is also involved because they all have ties. Bessler and the professor in Canada, Vancouver, they all have ties to the uranium industry, to the siting of, they have vested interests and will make money on the siting of underground nuclear waste facilities in Canada. They all have money and a vested interest in benefiting from taking him down and taking him out.
Right. Well, what is Dana's current status?
He has been attacked with EMF frequencies. He's been very, very, very sick. He even thought he could have plutonium or polonium poisoning. He was that ill. And he's losing teeth. He has 3 loose teeth. Leuren has lost 2 teeth, molars, for each of the last 2 interviews I've done with you.
Oh,
as soon as he put them on discs, all of a sudden he said to me, "There's something wrong with my tooth," and he would hand me a tooth sitting right next to him in front of his computer. So he's lost a tooth for each of the last 2 interviews you and I have done.
You and I should
They
talk
have
about
knocked
this
two
off
of my
camera.
teeth. They have knocked two of my teeth out, and they have removed the enamel from the back of the top tooth. They have slashed my face and caused a huge scar across my chin with a microwave knife through the window of my apartment, and they have burned a laser hole underneath the nostril. They've cut my hair off with a microwave knife. I haven't cut my hair for 20 years. They cut it from my waist all the way up to the back of my neck, half of it.
So
They kidnapped my daughter when she was 14, 13. I haven't seen her. She's 32 years old. I haven't seen her. Um, and they've sabotaged my cars. They've sabotaged my apartment. They've sabotaged my life. They've stolen my records, my diplomas, my degrees, my father's will. They are completely lawless and unscrupulous, and this is the state of California, the California government, the court system, its Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab, the University of California, Berkeley and Davis, Santa Cruz, San Diego, and it's just a global network of crime and criminals poisoning the world. It's nothing personal, though, Alfred. It's just like making
yeah,
a pair of shoes.
you know, see, this integrates, Leuren, with a lot of the research that we've been doing as well. Some of it with you on artificial intelligence.
Right.
And what you're feeling as symptomology is interaction with a pathogenic artificial intelligence.
That's right.
And so it feels like it's monstrous. It's inhuman because it's an artificial intelligence. You're up against something that's sentient, but it doesn't have a soul. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have human feelings.
Because it's just electrons going the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's just turning energy inside out and upside down. You can do it. You can turn it into positive energy, or you can turn it into negative energy.
Yeah.
And with all those manifestations. And that's what they're doing. They're using energy in the environment, in our bodies, in the atmosphere, against us. This is free energy, but they're using it for horrible things. Why don't they just give it to us?
Because there are various agendas and various competing agendas.
Well, I guess we'll have to take it then. Well, they make up their minds who's going to get it. We'll just take it.
One agenda is the AI agenda to transform the planet and Homo sapiens into an AI and trained, DNA and mental AI robotoid.
They're just making a mess out of everything, and they create chaos. They destroy things so they can loot and steal everything.
Yeah,
and then they kill everything and roll it all up and shove it out of the way, and they start all over again.
And the other agenda is the agenda to enhance this planet, Earth, as a love and soul-based human planet.
Well, that takes us to the Pope and the Patriarch.
Right.
It sure does.
So let's look at that one.
So why don't you ask me a question to start me off?
Well, how come Cuba, which is my maternal country, and which also has turned into the world Jesuit base, where one Barack Obama is visiting the world Jesuit base this week or so. Why? It's like,
I think He likes the salsa music in Havana.
Must be.
Yeah. No. What has happened is that Fidel Castro, his father brought his family, or he might not have been married then. Anyway, Fidel Castro's father was actually from an Italian family, the House of Farnese. And Castro's bloodline are the Dukes of Castro. Castro is directly descended from Alessandro Farnese, one of the ancient Iranian bloodlines that moved out from Central Asia through Persia, Eastern Turkey into Italy, because Italy is a country founded by Iranians, ancient Iranians. And his father was from Piacenza, born in northern Italy in Piacenza, one of the ancient Iranian original cities. And he appeared in Cuba and said that he had come from Spain and that he was just a field worker picking artichokes or something. But Castro's father arrived in Cuba from some lowly job, supposedly, in Spain as a field worker, and he bought an 11,000-acre ranch, or I should say plantation, in Cuba. So where did he get the money on the boat trip from Spain to Cuba to buy 11,000 acres of it's a sugarcane plantation, that's what it was. So I think he was born there, Castro was, but his father was born in Italy and was Italian and was a nobleman. And so Castro played football or soccer while he was still in school, and he had a dinner every Sunday at your grandmother's house on her plantation.
No, are you talking about my grandmother?
Yes.
No, you are embellishing there, and I'm not going to allow you to do that.
No, you told me Castro had dinner every Sunday.
While he grew up, you see, my uncle was a Jesuit priest, and he was, as part of his career growing up, he was the director of the Jesuit school Belém, which was a K through 12 school in Cuba, which was a huge school. And that's where Castro went. And one of my uncles, large family, 9, and Castro are contemporaries, and they played basketball together. And occasionally Castro would come over to my grandmother's house in the Vedado section of Havana for Sunday dinner, while they were playing basketball as teenagers growing up. While my uncle Albert and Castro were at the school that my uncle Richard ran as a Jesuit. That's the detail.
Okay, so he did have Sunday dinners there.
Yeah, but it wasn't a plantation. It was just,
Oh, I thought it was on the plantation. We haven't talked that much about it, so I didn't know all the details.
Yeah.
But anyway, Castro is a big player in the New World. This is North, Central, and South America. And this all came out when I started investigating Spanish land grants in California and discovered that the largest number of land grants in California and the largest parcels of land were listed in a U.S. Supreme Court ruling in the 1870s after the United States had received the Spanish part of America that was turned over to the U.S. government. And this lawsuit in the Supreme Court was to determine whether the Spanish land grant holders could retain their land grants under the U.S. government. And there had already been a treaty between the U.S. and the Spanish governments allowing that, called the Treaty of Hidalgo and Guadalupe. And the Supreme Court reviewed something like 870 applicants to retain their Spanish land grants, and they investigated each one separately on merit, and they ruled in favor of 670 about landholders, Spanish land grant holders, in their favor. And so then I started investigating why are Castros all over South America and Central America. Well, they were part of the noblemen, the aristocrats of old Europe, who had claims in the New World to new land grants granted by the Spanish government primarily. And so I also found a painting from the 1700s from Peru, and it was a painting of Loyola, who founded the Jesuits, standing there holding a skull with a kind of a halo around his head. And he was witnessing the marriage of his son to an Inca princess. And also there was a Borgia there whose son was also marrying another Inca princess. And so there we see how these families consolidate and maintain their power and their wealth and land holdings over centuries. They intermarry with each other. And this is an intermarriage of European noblemen and aristocrats with Peruvian or Inca indigenous rulers and aristocrats. And this is still happening. It's how they consolidate their holdings and maintain them over centuries and centuries, thousands of years, in fact. And there are other examples. It's just very, 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 very interesting. And I started getting into it because I always thought Central Asia was so mysterious. Why aren't there a lot of books and a lot of research and a lot of history in the universities and the schools about Central Asia? It's like a black hole. And I got a master's degree from UC Berkeley in the ancient history of the Middle East and Central Asia, and there just wasn't that much to know about Central Asia. But recently, a lot of DNA studies have been done across the whole Eurasian continent, and it turns out that all Eurasians came from and originated in Central Asia. And for instance, and then these ancient Iranian tribes, they were big settlers. They were very mobile because they were silk merchants. They had the best silk in the world, and it was coveted and bought and treasured all along the Silk Road. And they started moving into further and further west and into the Mediterranean region. And from Persia, when the Persian Empire, each empire collapsed, the noblemen and the royals would have to leave the country, and they would go and sort of start colonies in other places. And it turns out that the Kurds, a lot of them are in Turkey, they're in Syria and Iraq. Those are ancient Iranian bloodlines. All these areas, Libya, Iran, Iraq, Syria, they all have villages that are populated and were settled long ago by these ancient Iranian tribes. And they are still Zoroastrian. They still preserve their traditional culture and religion. And for instance, when Putin said he was going to bomb Syria to defend it and get rid of these terrorists, he received documents a list from the president of Iran, telling him asking President of Assad of Syria and President Putin of Russia to evacuate certain villages and towns in Syria and Iraq before this war started, because those were populated. They were Iranian bloodlines, and they were ancient Iranian tribes still living in these villages since 5,000 years ago. So I learned a lot about the history, the geography, the geopolitics for thousands of years just by following these wars. And now I understand much more about why things are happening the way they're happening in the Ukraine and Eastern Europe and in the Middle East and in the Mediterranean countries. It all makes sense now. And there's a very, very rich history, but the reason it's been hidden in Central Asia is because these ancient Iranian bloodlines that originated there are still ruling the world 5,000 years later. And they may have different names. They may not look like we think Persians look, but Castro actually looks very Iranian. When you put his pictures without a beard on next to Pope Paul III from the 1500s, it was pure Iranian. They look exactly the same, and nearly all the popes of Rome were actually Iranians. The papal tiara, the big domed sort of hat that the Pope wears, is what the Shahs of the ancient Iranian tribes in Central Asia wore. The red slippers that the Pope wears, those are Central Asian. So much of what is part of ritual and protocol and everything in Italy is all from indicating ancient Iranian origins. In fact, the Roman Empire was all Roman soldiers. They were all Iranians, and they housed them in this region east of Italy that was called, I don't know, they call it Romania because they named it as being the source for all the Roman soldiers. And it just turned out into another really big knowledge and information adventure, and I'm still involved in it. But the DNA studies that I found that have been done recently in the last 2 or 3 years are just superb for understanding the culture, the cultural exchange, the relocating tribes, the mixing and breeding, the planned breeding programs, the protocols for burials, the protocols for keeping pregnant women healthy, so they would have healthy babies. All of these things came out, and there's such a rich history from Central Asia because it's the history of all of Eurasia. It's their history, it's our history, it's who they are, it's who we are. And it's just incredible. And people have always said to me, "What are you?" Nobody could ever tell me what I was. And I said, "Well, I don't know, I'm American." And then a woman came up to me one day and said, "You know your last name?" She was from Morocco. And she said, "You know what your last name means, Moret?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, well, it means the people from the Middle East. And your family were Middle Easterners taken to Europe by the Crusaders 1,000 years ago to build an infrastructure in Europe. They were in the Bronze Age. They were so backwards, and they had no infrastructure at all. So the Morets set up the whole banking infrastructure for Europe. They set up the firehouses. No, there was no way to put out fires in towns and cities and villages. And so they started firehouses. They started hospitals. And they made Europe a modern region. They gave all of their knowledge and their skills and everything to this undeveloped area, undeveloped region. And I think a lot of the problems are the envy and the jealousy and the resentment of the backward people in Europe, who are still backward compared to the Central Asian and the Middle Eastern groups who have been civilized for a very, very, very long time. And so I learned all these things from the DNA studies, and I also learned, for instance, I know an Iranian immediately because 14,000 years ago, a genetic mutation in one Iranian tribe created albinoism in that tribe, and it ranged from fairly mild albinoism, which produced blonde hair, blue eyes, to green eyes, hazel eyes, gray eyes, and to the extreme mutation was red hair. And there are pictures today of modern Afghanis with orange-red hair. You can look at them and tell they're albinos. Some of them have very, very light blue eyes or almost white eyes. And they're standing there, you know, 2 husbands and 2 wives and about 12 kids around them, and absolutely everybody has red hair. So I know now where those people came from, and those are Iranian genes that they are carrying. And you know, Edgar Mitchell, the astronaut who went to the moon, I've interviewed him a few times, and he said, the one thing I learned in space was that matter has memory. And every time I get into DNA studies, genetic studies, that always comes to mind. Matter has memory. And so I started following signs and symbols instead of reading books on history and archaeology and anthropology, because they were all wrong or missing too much. And it's the signs and symbols that have led me to this very, very interesting new reality, which is who really rules the world. It's those ancient Iranian bloodlines. And the Shah of Iran was one of them. I believe that Nancy Pelosi is from one of them. All kinds of people. Castro, just lots of people that I've come across. And they hold interesting positions, high in politics, high in corporations. Most of the wonderful Italian couture and the designers, they're all very, very high at high levels in this ancient Iranian hierarchy, and you can tell by the clothes. They all have elements and styles that originated in Central Asia. And the physical characteristic of many Italians is that they're fairly slim and kind of reedy. Well, that's the physiology of Central Asian people. And so I can identify people now from their physiology, from the color of their hair and eyes, from the designers. I can tell what influenced them. And then I started watching the weddings of the royals and the prominent families in Europe, and that's where I really started to get a whole lot more information about their special breeding programs. For instance, Prince Rainier of Monaco was half Moroccan. He was half Berber. The Berbers are ancient Iranians. They're related to the Basques in Spain. They're all ancient Iranians who originated from the Hittites, ancient tribes that are described in the Bible, who came from Central Asia. Well, the Hittites brought horses and horsemanship to the Mediterranean and the Middle East. They never had any. And all of the war methods, the war terms, terminology, thousands of words that are military words, convoy, and lots of other words, are all Central Asian words. And the tribes now, the people in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, who are winning now, are using ancient Mesopotamian and earlier warfare, the nomadic warfare, the nomadic warriors who wandered the Silk Road for thousands of years with horses and everything. When they use their traditional methods of warfare, they don't need a budget and they don't need equipment. They use strategy, and they even build their own missiles. The tribes in Yemen who are they destroyed Blackwater. Blackwater left. They couldn't afford to fight them anymore. And so if they stick to if they follow their traditional warfare methods, they win. And that's how Iraq defeated Iran in the 10-year Iraq-Iran war. Saddam Hussein used ancient Mesopotamian warfare and trapped the Iraqis down in the swamps where the Tigris and Euphrates empty into the ocean, and defeated them. And the CIA agent who was in charge of monitoring the Iraq-Iran war told me himself, we never, ever, ever expected Iraq to win that war. We thought Iran was going to. And he said, but Saddam Hussein used Mesopotamian warfare. It's what Hezbollah used against the Israelis and defeated what the Israelis thought was the greatest army in the whole military in the whole world. Well, they had planes, they had fighter jets, they had bombers, but they lost in Lebanon because it's strategy that matters. It's not might. And that is why that's why Putin is winning. He's not winning for himself or so that Russia can have a colony. He's winning the sovereignty back for these nations. He's making them strong enough to be able to defend themselves, and he's unifying them so that they can join with each other to protect themselves from the region from external attacks. And the Silk Road is going to be successful, and it will not be subjected or influenced by the United States.
Right. Now, but let's flip over to the one world religion agenda.
Yes.
Which paradoxically is happening in Cuba this week with the Pope, the Patriarch, the Obama, and the Castro. And you can't get more one world religion than that.
Yes, and
what is that agenda all about? And could the false dawn and all of that?
Yes, this what I've just said, and I was talking about the warring tribes who follow their ancient warring traditions win over modern warfare, and so what is happening now is these people at the top, the Jesuits and the ancient Iranian bloodlines over them, and the Zionists who serve them, including the Jesuits, they are now attacking religion and spirituality in order to modify that. They're giving us another bag of beads, like the Manhattan, when the English traded beads, or the Dutch traded a handful of beads for the whole island of Long Island with the natives. They're trying to take our spiritual strength and our energy, our spiritual energy from us, our spirituality, our souls. That's what they're trying to kill now, because that's what allows indigenous people to conquer armies and to resist powers that are more powerful than they are. So this meeting that happened between the Pope and the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church in Cuba a few weeks ago is extremely important. And it's extremely important because the purpose of their agenda of the Pope's agenda and the Jesuit agenda. Now they're pulling the Patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church in. It's to do away with all traditional religions and to combine all of them under the Pope. They must all submit to the Pope and create a one world religion, which is going to be some flim-flam, useless practices and beliefs that disempower us. And this is very, very, very important because Castro arranged that meeting between the Jesuit Pope, and remember, Castro's ancestor started the Jesuits, Pope Paul III, and so Castro is still the king of the Jesuits, and he's also probably the highest ranking ancient Iranian family, because North, Central, and South America really belong to the Castros and oversight. And this is resulting in a genocide of Christians, the Christians who will not submit to the Pope, even though he's a Jesuit. Jesuits aren't even religious, they're atheists. So why is he suddenly posing as the Pope? It's illegal under Vatican law. A Jesuit can never be the Pope of Rome. They're not even religious. And Castro said in the mainstream media in the last couple of years a number of times, well, my brother and I are atheists. We don't even believe in God. But we might convert to Catholicism. Well, they're about to both croak, so they better hurry up. But anyway, this new religion, what is it about? It's really horrible. And the White House today denied that the genocide that's going on, or ISIS executing, exterminating the Christians in the Middle East and in all over the Middle Eastern countries, but especially in Iraq and Iraq and Syria, it hasn't progressed enough to be able to be referred to as genocide. So they're admitting that genocide's going on, but not enough people have died yet to be able to really call it genocide. But it is targeting of Christians. Those Christians in Syria have been there since Christianity started. These are old tribes and old villages. They're still living in the same villages thousands of years later. So what is this all about? Well, let me just read something from a book called False Dawn. And it's by Lee Penn, who is he's a Catholic and was a Marxist. But he wrote this book, False Dawn, The United Religions Initiative, Globalism, and the Quest for a One World Power. And it was written in 2005. You can get it used on Amazon. Quote, the interfaith movement, which began with the 1893 World's Parliament of Religions in Chicago, remember Chicago's Rockefeller, has grown worldwide. Although this movement has been largely unknown to the public, it now provides a spiritual face for globalization, the economic and political forces leading us all from nationalism to one world. The most ambitious organization in today's interfaith movement is the United Religions Initiative, URI, founded by William Swing, the Episcopal Bishop of California. Well, there you see the hidden hand of Castro. Castro runs and owns California. Investigative reporter Lee Penn, a Catholic ex-Marxist, exhaustively documents the history and beliefs of the URI and its New Age and globalist allies, the vested interests that support these movements, and the direction they appear to be taking. The interfaith movement is no longer merely the province of a coterie of little-heeded religious idealists with grandiose visions. The URI's proponents have ranged from billionaire George Soros to President George W. Bush, from the far-right Reverend Sun Myung Moon to the liberal Catholic theologian Hans Kung, and from the Dalai Lama to the leaders of government-approved Protestant churches in the People's Republic of China. The interfaith movement, including the URI, is being promoted by globalist and New Age reformers who favor erosion of national sovereignty, marginalization of traditional religions, establishment of global governance, and creation of a new earth-based global spirituality, in effect a one-world religion. Therefore, the URI and the interfaith movement are poised to become the spiritual foundation of the New World Order. So, the new civilization now proposed by Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union. The reign of quantity and the signs of the times, French metaphysician René Guénon spoke of the anti-tradition, the forces of materialism and secular humanism. This is the transhumanism, finally giving way to the counter-tradition. The satanic inversion of true spirituality leading the regime of Antichrist. The anti-tradition weakens and dissolves traditional spiritualities, after which the counter-tradition sets up a counterfeit in their place. And so here we see, Alfred, what they're really doing, and the Soka Gakkai, which is a group, an organization founded in 1930 by the Jesuits in Japan to infiltrate Buddhism, is now in the United States and all over the world. They are atheists, they are satanic, and they were even at the war crimes tribunals in Malaysia. And they have a chapter in Los Angeles. A man from Cuba, an academic who is retired now, has taken it over, and he has called it part of Nichiren Buddhism. He even married a Japanese woman. And they travel between Japan and Cuba all the time, but they live in LA and run this organization. Well, Soka Gakkai was finally uncovered. There were scandals in the 1990s, and the Nichiren purged the entire religious order of the Soka Gakkai, but they're still calling themselves Buddhists. They're not. And so it's now, what was Castro's son doing in Malaysia at the War Crimes Tribunal if he wasn't spying on us? And his UN spies were running it for him.
I see.
So the Christians are being genocided. Other religions that refuse to submit to the Pope are being genocided. The war in Serbia was a genocide of Russian Orthodox Christians. In Novorossiya, in eastern Ukraine, that is actually a covert genocide of the largest remaining Russian Orthodox communities in Russia and the Ukraine. And the Bolshevik Revolution expelled and murdered the Russian Orthodox people. The the ones who left Russia and were settled all over the world, they're now being attacked by the Moscow patriarchs of the Russian Orthodox Church, who are trying to steal all the church land that the expelled Russian Orthodox people hold or own around the world. And so you see, they refuse to submit, so they're going to have their wealth stripped first, and then they will be genocided as well. And they're doing this for other religions as well. They want one world religion. They want one source for everything, so that there's a sole source, and there will be no ownership. None of us will be allowed to own anything. We will just be a number. This is what David Rockefeller and Brzezinski described. Everyone will have a number on a satellite, and
yeah, I think that I heard informally, I don't know, that it's been announced that this was the last Dalai Lama. You know, because
yes,
traditionally it's a soul that reincarnates.
that's
So
right.
that's a significant, and that the Chinese will be appointing all of the future.
Right. And so you see, as we look around us after an interview like this, people will take this home with them. It's a lot of information, a lot of it is completely new, but they already have a lot of pieces of that puzzle, but they never had a frame, a picture frame or a puzzle frame to help them relate those pieces to each other. And so what we're giving people is a beginning for them to figure it out themselves. And so they have a proper frame, and they know they have some of the information, and now we'll start getting comments where people give us gold nuggets every day of fantastic information, pieces, obscure pieces of this puzzle, and so they're helping us too. We've had an abrupt disconnect with our recording, so we'd like to thank all the viewers who have enjoyed this interview, and to invite them to listen next week, same time, to the next part of it, and it will be One World Religion. This is the most important plank in the New World Order agenda. It's number one, so I think people will be very, very interested in it. And I would like to thank all of you for the wonderful comments you've left for us. I can't use my own computer to post comments. The comments, it blocks my answer to people, so I'll eventually get to it, but sometimes it's not as fast as people want to hear back from me, and I apologize. And I would like to thank the wonderful information that people are leaving in their comments, and the discussion that goes on with multiple people, and I really want to encourage that. Because we learn as much as the visitors leaving the comments. And I would like to thank the people who have made wonderful donations. It makes it possible for us to do this, to put these interviews up. And it takes a lot of time to do all this research, but I'm addicted to it, so so it's really fun. But we still need funding, and we do really appreciate all of your generosity and your caring, your emails and wonderful messages of love and appreciation. And we like criticism too. Nobody is perfect, and each time people make comments in a I don't mean the trolls just attacking, but I mean people who make constructive comments who help us be more accurate or to go more deeply into issues. We're very, very thankful and grateful for your feedback as well. So go to our website, LeurenMoret.info. There are lots and lots of papers and news and documents and research, and there are cartoons. It's a beautiful, beautiful website that Laurent Battis has put together, and I really thank him because I love doing the interviews. They're so professional. They look so professional the way he presents them. And I'd like to thank Alfred, too, for all the adventures he's taken me on and introduced me to. I've taken him on some adventures, too. And just don't be afraid. Just free fall through life. Don't try to control everything. Let things happen and learn from them. Just have integrity to yourself and bless those around you. And be very careful about what you eat. Be sure to filter your water with reverse osmosis filters, and those are described on our website in lifestyles. And we recommend the water filter that we used. Laurence did a lot of research to determine which one would be the best. You can order it from Amazon for about $350, and it protects you, your children, your pets, everyone, your future. And prevention in health is always much better than trying to come up with a cure. And it's a whole lot cheaper, too. So I'd like to thank all of you, and Alfred for doing the interview, and Laurence for being the engineer. And we're looking forward to our next interview and to hearing more from all of you. Thank you very much. It's my birthday today. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Leuren.
Thank you.